Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with our guest host again, Anita Agrawal, and we thought we'd have an interesting conversation on creative ways to find work. So we all know the traditional process of applying online and going through the interview process. And then the, preferred way is to network and find a connection and get into the workspace that way. But there are even more creative ways to get a job. So we thought we'd recount some stories and instances in terms of how other people were kind of outside of kind of those normal realms in order to land something. So yeah, Anita, I'd be curious to see and hear some of maybe stories from your students or others that have secured jobs in other than the traditional methods. So what sort of creative ways have you found to work?
All right. So thank you again for having me on here, Luki. I really appreciate it. So I would say that I have 6 ideas that you could implement.
Cool.
The first of which, and I'd love for you to chime in, Luki, and tell me a story that might relate to you as well. So the first one that I would say is go directly to the businesses that you want to get a job in. Very few people tend to do this. I'll tell you a quick story about what happened with me. I had the building that I used to have my business in. It had about maybe 100 other jewelers in. So it was all B2B wholesale jewelers. And so this is kind of the Diamond District of Toronto. And what happened was this recent George Brown jewelry graduate, basically she printed out 200 copies of her resume and she just went knocking on everyone's door. She had a little bit of an idea of which companies to go to and she knew a little bit about the companies that she visited, but she just went door to door with her resume and she was dressed professionally and she knocked on our door and immediately I said to her, "No, sorry, I have no work for you. Have a nice day. Goodbye." But what happened was I was doing this task that I really hated. And I looked down at the task and I was like, wait a second. I don't need to actually do this task. Let me call this girl back and say, look, you know what? If you can get me a reference from so-and-so professor at George Brown, who I know, I will hire you for 2 months on a trial basis.
Okay.
And she's like, okay, I don't really want 2 months, but you know what? Right now I'll take it. Right.
Okay.
She was able to get me the reference. And the interesting thing was she ended up working with me for 2 full years.
Okay.
So this was not even a job that I had. It was not a job that was anywhere it was not even in my mind. But the fact that she just happened to be there, it worked out perfectly. And I've heard countless other examples of this. For example, if you look at any industry, there's usually a neighborhood that is dedicated to that industry, whether it's the fashion district in Toronto, whether it's the jewelry industry, whether it's food canning. I noticed in Scarborough, I had a lot of students at Centennial who were like, oh, I want to work in food manufacturing and food production. But there's a whole strip of these little tiny canning facilities that exist in Scarborough. If you just drive by, you're like, oh, there's I just saw 6 of them. There must be more. So if you actually think about the areas, the industry that you want to work in, find the district or neighborhood where most of those businesses are populated and just go in with your resume, dress up nicely, go in, and you would be surprised. I mean, yeah.
I think that's an amazing example, and the one that I have, which is similar but a little bit different because it's more for someone looking to get into the freelance side but going directly to the business, right? They were interested in marketing because it seems to be easier for that. Well, actually, not really marketing, more graphic design and composition. Basically, what they did is they went into Google Maps and basically found restaurants that were around and went through and take a look at the menus and things like that, right? And basically took an afternoon, took a weekend to say, okay, you know what? There's some nice pictures in here, and they grabbed them and then created a menu for them, right? Because they looked at their online menu and it was this kind of drab, kind of very plain and whatever, and had it kind of mocked up, and they didn't spend anything. They didn't even print it out, and then they went kind of door to door to the restaurant and say, oh, I did this for you. What do you think? And they had 2 or 3 different designs, and a lot of them said, nah, not interested. But a couple of them, wow, those are fantastic. And how much would it cost? And then they went through the process, got a sale right then and there. So it's a little bit of work on spec, but it's also kind of knowing the business, putting in some of that upfront effort and putting yourself out there even in the first place. And I think that effort goes a long way. And it's never going to be 100%, because I think from your experience, they had 200 resumes and kind of one hit, but that hit allowed them to work for 2 years. So that's not a bad set of odds as well.
I think she actually had multiple hits.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, but she liked the fact that it was my business and she liked me, and so it worked out. But
Okay.
she did meet with quite a few people,
Awesome.
so that was exciting. Yeah, this what you just said actually leads me to my second point.
Okay.
Is create your own opportunity.
Sure.
And with your example, this woman created or this person created menus, right? But there's a really good example about a 25-year-old woman who actually was like being really unsuccessful in getting a job at Airbnb. And that was like her dream job. She's like, I want to work at Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
But what she did was she got no luck. And so what she did was she actually looked at Airbnb globally, and she realized she was Middle Eastern, who was person who was living in San Francisco. And so what she realized was there was no Airbnb at that time in the Middle East.
Okay.
So she created this amazing marketing strategy for Airbnb to, develop in the Middle East. And then she tweeted that marketing strategy directly to the CEO. And she actually got hired. So that's the thing, is like, create your own opportunity. I know that's a little bit of work, but guess what? You're probably spending countless hours anyways, into the ether. And at least this way you have something for your own portfolio. You have something impressive, and you've learned something along the way. So, and I say this to students all the time, like students who are in marketing or students who are in digital marketing, like, look at businesses that you really love. Do they have an online social media presence? Like something in your neighborhood? Usually small mom and pop stores don't. But if you just want a reference, you could say to them, look, you know what? I noticed I really love your food. I noticed that you don't have any social media presence.
Sure.
For a month, I will do all your social media for you. You don't have to spend a ton of time. And I don't expect you to be used. Like, what I'm saying is I don't want you to be used for free labor. Mm-hmm. But if it means like saying, for 2 weeks, I'll do this for you, or for a month, I'll do this for you, and you're just volunteering on a small time basis, you've earned yourself a reference at the very least. You might not end up with a job, but you will get a reference, and you will build a portfolio towards that job or career, right?
Yeah. And what that reminds me of is taking the time to actually hone your craft, right? Because you go to school and you do some assignments and some projects, and you kind of know how to do it, but you don't really know how to do it, right? You've never actually done it in the real world. So the example that comes to mind, which is similar to that, is, again, I guess it's another marketing example, because I think it tends to be easier for them. But someone really loved kind of one of those kind of craft food and whole food type things. And she was applying for jobs. She was networking. She was trying to get in front of them to do their marketing. Pretty much exactly what you had said. A lot of no's, lots of rejections, and all that sort of stuff. She said, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway, right? So she actually created her own hashtag, which like with something and the name of the company, but put her name on it so that they know it came from her. And then it had 1 follower, and then it had 2. And then it had 17, and then it had 25, and then it had 105. And then she basically said, so I'm doing this, and I have like 104 followers, and I did this in the past like 2 weeks or something like that. What do you think? Right? And then it kind of turned into, wow, an opportunity as well. So I think that was definitely an extension of that, where sometimes even if you get the no's, sometimes you can still continue on. And at the very least, you're honing your craft, you're doing something. So that marketing strategy she created, she got some guidance, right? She said, wow, this is good. They appreciate it. But even if you don't, then hopefully you get some good feedback to say, okay, this is what I do differently. This is what I would change. This is why I didn't take it, so that you can learn and do it again for the next time. So I think that's another great strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I would say is, and I think this is an extension of my last point, but maybe a little bit more in depth. Look at the industry that you're wanting to get into. And and look at all the players that you can find, like whether they're the big players or whether they're the medium players or the small players, whoever they are, look at them and do an assessment to see what's missing. You might have previous experience. This is great for somebody who might be transitioning careers. So you might have previous experience in something like a niche area, and now you're transitioning to another area. Is there something that you learned in your previous job that you could actually apply to an industry that's totally different? So for example, like, I had a friend who is a diversity consultant, right? But she's like also a disability diversity consultant. And there were changes to the regulations in what was required for coaching and training for Ontario's small businesses. And so what she decided to do was she came up with this training plan to talk specifically about the changes to the disability code that could help a certain industry. And I think in this case, it was the restaurant industry. So she looked at that as a niche. She looked at like all the things that are missing in restaurants that could be served by understanding the new disability policies. And she brought that to the table. Likewise, so this is a little bit more work, but if you do want to be a freelancer or you want to run your own business, or even if you want to get a job in a certain industry, if you do that groundwork before and look at what's missing, you can create that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good point where oftentimes folks, when they're looking for jobs, will always focus on the big players, right? If they're going in finance, they want the big banks and the big telecoms and the big whatever. But there's so many smaller businesses around that would benefit from your help. And oftentimes they don't have kind of the huge person power or resources to do something. So the fact that you can bring some experience from a different area and maybe play multiple hats as well could be a different way of putting things. I was trying to think of an example of someone that kind of went through that. I don't really have one right now, but if I think of one, I'll put through. But I know that if you do widen your search from an industry perspective and look for more than kind of the usual suspects, then you'll probably have a lot more hits. And especially in a place like Canada, where Canada has, I think the stat was like 90% of them are all like small or medium businesses type of thing. So if you're not looking at them, then there's a whole set of opportunities that you're missing, right? So just something to be aware of. So that's a good point.
Can I give you another example on this?
Of course,
same time? Okay. So I actually have two people that I know who in their later years, like near retirement age, they both decided to take wine sommelier courses.
Okay.
And both of them are doing the same kind of business, but they both target different industries.
Okay.
So this is just their passion project. So they decided, they're near retirement. Let's do wine sommelier work. So one of them, she was really brilliant about it. She did this wine sommelier course, which was her second career, right?
Okay.
And much later in life. And she decided to create events around that. So what she did was she reached out to women's business organizations or other women's associations. And she said, you know what? Let me bring the wine for your event. Let me show you how to drink it. Let me do a little tutorial. And, the wine will be at cost because I have all these relationships with these different vineyards. And, it was so brilliant, and it's worked out really beautifully that this is now her full-time career, which was just like a passion project in the past, right? But and now everybody uses her, like all these business associations that I know, I keep on seeing her at these events. So, and I know another man who did the same thing. His technique is a little bit different, but he did the exact same thing. So, there's lots of opportunity. Where can you make that? Where can you find your niche, and where can you see that there's a need? Like all business associations and events usually have some kind of alcohol. If you can arrange it so you can provide the alcohol, you're making money on teaching them as well as on the alcohol, right? So
yeah, I think that's another good point where it's looking to kind of compound that effect, right? Where it could be supplying, it could be teaching, it could be providing that experience. I think is becoming more and more relevant because it's not just, oh, you get it at a cheaper price or do that. Like at if you do that, then it's basically a race to the bottom, right?
Yeah.
But if you can provide that extra value and say, okay, what is it unique about you, either through your past experience or whatever it is that makes me want to hire you, then expanding kind of your understanding of the industry or understanding the players or whatever, and then the other part I took away from that is you can start a second career, right? Even if you're later in life, and it can be more of a passion project, especially if you're probably more financially stable and stuff like that. Then why not? Because most people wouldn't think about turning kind of wine sommelier as a second career, but it's never too late. Sounds like. So, cool. What are some other suggestions that you give for folks or creative ways to find work?
So this one is really a simple suggestion for any students. So students, like you're on the cutting edge of information. You're learning all these new topics, and LinkedIn is such an easy platform. So what I would say is start becoming an expert in your industry early. Don't do that like later. Don't wait till you graduate. Start writing like a simple article every week on LinkedIn. And the thing about articles and attention spans now, as you know, Luki, like people's attention spans are shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yep.
So the beauty about LinkedIn is all you have to do is find a current topic that's related to your industry and give your input about it for like in 500 words, and just do that on a weekly basis. And then later on, I mean, as you start successfully developing some kind of following for your articles, you can start tagging people that are in the industry, put those in group discussions on LinkedIn. But this is the thing, when you've established yourself as an expert like this, you are going to generate some kind of traction. But also when it comes to actually applying for jobs, when people do a background search on you, they're going to come up with all your opinions about this. So this is just another way to kind of develop that expertise.
Yeah, I think that's a great example and a great pointer in the sense where some folks that I kind of give similar recommendations to, they kind of push back on the fact that, well, I'm not an expert. I don't know anything about this. I'm just a student. I'm just getting in. It's like, well, but you have a perspective. You have some thoughts. You can learn and you can grow. So an easy way to do this is to share what I learned today in blah, like whatever it is that you're doing, right? And you can share a new technology, a new product, a new this and that, a new upcoming trend, all that, and just share whatever your 500 words on that, right?
Yep.
And then you do that consistently, daily, consistently, week after week, that sort of thing. And then you start popping up on people's feeds because they follow the same hashtags. And when people like or comment, then it might not be a lot at first, but it might be one or two or whatever. Well, engage in conversation with those people, because chances are at some point they will be hiring, or they'll know someone they'll be hiring. So, and if you keep coming up on their feed and are seen as a quote unquote expert, even though you aren't truly an expert, you don't have to have a PhD or anything. You can just be someone who is kind of a thought leader, someone who is putting these ideas in front of other people. So you don't have to focus on that word expert. Focus on kind of thought leadership is one way of putting it, or just a distributor of interesting information. You could call yourself that.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you can often become top of mind for someone who's looking to hire. And it's like, well, if I was looking for someone with related to jewelry, well, Anita's going to be top on the list, that sort of thing, right? And if you had a friend who always talks about wine, maybe that sommelier would be there. For career coaching, hopefully it's me. But if it's not, those are the ways where you can get to top of mind. And definitely that doesn't have to be because you own your own business. It could also be when you're trying to get into that industry. Because the thing is, when you start developing your reputation, then it carries forward, right?
Yeah.
So it might not help you now, it might help you in 2 years, and in 12 years, and in 27 years, but that kind of keeps with you for a long time. So yeah, definitely a worthwhile suggestion, and a good investment in yourself as well.
Yeah. And I think that with that suggestion, consistency is key, right? It really is about being consistent, doing it regularly. Like you said, the first time you're not going to get, maybe you'll get 2 or 3 views, but you know what? Over time, that's going to exponentially grow. It just has to. There's no other way to do that. And yeah, Yeah.
And you might be lucky and get that kind of viral post where like thousands and tens of thousands get it. But I mean, if you get from 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3 and then 3 to 5 and then so on and so forth, then that's
Yeah.
what you want to do as well. So
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Consistently have that growth.
Sure.
Absolutely. The fifth one that I would say is volunteer. And this one has probably been the best way that I've gotten jobs. And this is the thing, you might think that, you know what, you're volunteering and it's not going to pay off, and, you know, you're doing this thing and nobody's watching you. But the reality is this: volunteering is such a great option to like further your career. I can't emphasize that enough.
Sure.
So, for example, when I was 23, I went into this organization, and I think I talked about this before in a previous session, and I joined the board of the organization as the chair of their board. And it was a huge learning curve. I learned so much about how to operate a business. I learned so much about how to work with other people. I learned so much about the industry that I was volunteering for, and that was for the arts sector.
Okay.
And this is the thing. I managed to achieve a lot of things while I was president of that board over the 4 years that I was there. But I also ended up making a large community.
Sure.
Now, what ended up happening in, I think, fast forward to, so this was in 2003 to 2007, fast forward to 2010, where I was actually interviewed by somebody at the federal government to come and do like a consultant job in the art sector. Now, this is the thing about the art sector is, you usually, if you're doing a consultant job like that, you either have to be an artist or you might want to have an MBA that's focused towards working in the arts. And there's actually diplomas that are called business for the arts diplomas as well for colleges. So I didn't have any of those. But what I did have was this huge, long experience of working in the arts as a volunteer. And luckily, unfortunately, I did end up getting this job, and it was a fantastic job. And I worked in that kind of position for the next 5 years. But that's the thing. It might not lead to immediate results, but the skills that you learn multiply so much when you volunteer. And while I have nothing against like groundwork volunteering, like frontline volunteering, like for example, I don't know, petting animals at the Humane Society, or reading books to children, or building homes for, you know, people. While I have no issues against that, I'll say if you want to get into a higher level position, try to think of leadership volunteer opportunities, whether that's on a board or whether that's, you know, doing something that's a little bit more related to your field. Right. So I always kind of had tangentially been involved in business things, and therefore working on boards has always been really great for me.
Yeah, I think volunteering, in my opinion, well, I usually tell people that it's one of the best forms of networking, right? Because, well, not only do they get to meet you, they get to see you in action, right? The type of work that you can do over a period of time. And if you do a great job, if you're always the one showing up early, putting up your hand and volunteering for these new things, coming up with new innovative ideas, hey, that's the type of person I want to work with, right? And they might have an opportunity that's similar. And talking about volunteering, pick a cause that you're interested in, right? So don't just pick volunteer just for the sake of it. Maybe convenience because it's close by. But if you have a cause, if you're interested in the arts, volunteer for the arts. If you have no interest in the arts, then don't volunteer for the arts, right? Go pick something where you're passionate about, and then that passion will go a long way. And to your point on leadership roles, I think what often happens is that there's not kind of leadership roles right out the get-go. So oftentimes you need to be the one on the front lines, petting the animals or distributing flyers or doing whatever. And then they say, wow, this person is consistently being able to do that. And then you're poised to put up your hand whenever there are volunteers. Hey, I will do that. I will manage that campaign. I will do that. I will take over this group of volunteers and do that. And then I will be promoted president, and I will keep on going and all that sort of stuff. So don't necessarily think that you're going to go run straight into those roles.
And that's a really good point, because I did volunteer as a frontline volunteer for the Canadian Diabetes Association when I was 17 to 19. And the funny thing was, at that time, there was a new development on websites. Okay. So
Okay.
this is a long time ago. And they actually offered me a job to build a website. I think they just looked at me as a young volunteer and they're like, you must know this stuff.
Right.
So do you want this job? It's a year-long contract to like help us build a website and develop content for the website. And I was like, I can't because I'm in school full time studying biology. I don't know anything about computers. But then ironically, I ended up working in e-commerce. So that's the thing. So you're right. A frontline volunteer opportunity can lead to like a full-time position. So that is a really, really good point as well.
And one point why I say that that volunteering is a good form of networking is, in addition to just doing whatever you're supposed to be doing, chat with the other people around you. What do they do? What are they interested? What occupies their time? What are their challenges? What could you help with? Because sometimes connecting with those people, they see you in one environment, but that doesn't mean you can't necessarily do it in another environment, right? So leverage that opportunity to connect and build meaningful connections with other people as well. So.
Yeah, and that was the thing with the Diabetes Association. Just downstairs from them, they had this really good bagel store. And so when I only went there once a week, but the people that I would work with, they're like, you got to go to this bagel store. So I would go and like have lunch with them.
Sure.
And I think that's what really helped. We built this camaraderie, this relationship, because I think fundamentally that's the truth about any job. It's about the relationships that you build.
Right.
Whether that's today or whether that's in the future, it's all about the relationships. So
for sure. Yeah, it goes back to that typical expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And then I usually further that to say it's not who you know, it's who knows you. Because just because you know them, true. That doesn't mean anything. When you have the bagels on a weekly basis, then they get to know you, and then they want to work with you and they want to hire you. So that's definitely important.
Yeah, so true, so true. And the last thing that I was going to say is information gather in unconventional ways.
Okay.
And I wanted to share this example. So this is maybe it's like you can do this before you apply for a job, but you can also do this like during the job interview process. So I'll give you an example of my cousin. And he wanted to work at the largest manufacturer of fries. Okay. So I won't mention the name, but I think it's pretty obvious where that is. But anyways, so in order to understand the production and the process of fries, he actually went to 15 grocery stores before his interview. And he looked at where the fries were placed in comparison to the competitors' fries. And he noticed that a couple of stores, they weren't placed at eye level. So I didn't know all this about food placement, but in order for food to be at eye level, usually companies pay for that.
Yeah.
And so he was like, he went to all these stores, he made a little chart about where it's placed. And then he realized that this company, though they were a leader in fries, they were not a leader in hash browns. And so he was like, okay, well, why are they not a leader in hash browns? And so he actually made this like whole like chart about it. The other thing that he did was he went to a fast food restaurant. Even though he didn't want to like work at a fast food restaurant, he decided to try it out for 2 weeks because he wanted to understand the life cycle of fries. And he came to a bunch of conclusions. He's like, well, fries are the most frequently upsold item on the menu. So that's why, McDonald's and places like that ask, well, do you want fries with that? Because it's cheap and it's a good upsell. So he's like, okay, that's number one. Second thing is they're also the most thrown out food as well.
Okay.
So all of these things that he did ultimately was a great way to information gather. And it's a little unconventional. And I would say whatever industry it is that you're trying to get into, whether it's like the fries, industry, like he wanted to get into the fast food kind of restaurant industry, or if it's something, like car manufacturing or something, try to find and collect data that is in an unconventional way. Because when you actually do go for your interview, first of all, you're going to make interesting connections during that process of unconventional data gathering. So first thing, you'll make connections. Second thing is, it's great topics of conversation when you actually do go in for an interview for that industry. Because I mean, imagine he went for an executive level position, but he was able to tell them all the things he did to actually understand their product. And I think that's what makes for a really, unique way of storytelling, especially when it comes to interview time.
For sure. And I think what that also does is speaks to kind of the level of commitment and interest, right? So you're not applying to these types of jobs on a whim and saying, let me just give it a shot, right? You actually are making an investment. Say, you know what, I'm going to go out, spend my weekends, my afternoons, and this spare time that I would otherwise have, and gather this information, take the time and make these interesting connections out there. So oftentimes folks want to know that you made an effort, right? So that's why something even as simple as writing a cover letter, it can be helpful because, well, it takes time, right? And the half an hour it took you to write a cover letter speaks a little bit. Now, going out of your way and like visiting different grocery stores and restaurants and stuff like that, that's a whole other level of commitment and interest in that, where it's like, for sure, if they're going to do that and they don't even have the job, what are they going to do when they start on Monday? That sort of thing, right? So those are the types of things that you want to be doing and giving that type of impression. And all those things are great guidance and advice.
And I want to combine the last 2 points together. So the unconventional data gathering and the volunteering.
Okay.
So one thing that I always tell my students is, look, do you want to go to a conference that is like $3,000? And I have been to conferences where it's been like 5 days long and it's $3,000.
Wow.
I know most students cannot afford that.
Yeah.
I have to go to these things because that's where I make clients, right? But this is what I tell students. You can always go to these conferences, and it's quite simple. Go to different convention center websites, look at their calendar of events. I mean, we're finally going to start going to events again, I'm hoping.
Sure.
So that's the only thing. But you know what? Look at their calendar of events. And what you need to do is you need to do this like 3 or 4 months in advance. Look at what their calendar of events is like in, I don't know, right now we're in July. Look at their events in September and to December, and find out the events that are most interesting to you. If the price tag is $800 or $3,000, don't worry about it. What you need to do is email these conferences that you want to go to and ask the people there who organize it if you can volunteer, because you're going to get in free. But this is the best place. And the more expensive the conference, the better for the networking, because you're going to be connecting with people who are usually pretty high up in the organization. We're going to be able to pay those kinds of conference bills, right? So, make sure that you do that. Go volunteer for these conferences. And the other thing is, the nice thing about those conference websites is you can see who has booths there. You can see who's sponsoring the event. And the nice thing is you can email all those people in advance and say, look, in 4 months from now, you have a conference in Toronto. I'm here to volunteer at your booth if you want. And you've got another ticket, but you've also got a one-on-one contact. And this is the thing about trade shows. I have probably done 500 trade shows in my lifetime as an exhibitor. And I'll tell you, at the last minute, the day before, somebody or the other always gets sick. So if you're there saying, I'm here, I'm your Toronto person, take me to your conference, I will volunteer at your booth, I will do the training, whatever you need, they're probably going to call on you. So
yeah, I think that's amazing guidance. And it kind of, what it reminds me of is someone had mentioned where they're volunteering. Well, actually, they're organizing events, like as most folks in student clubs and things like that do. And they made the effort to, when they were shuttling kind of a guest speaker from one place to another, engage in conversation, polite conversation, all that sort of stuff, but made it an experience for them. So it wasn't just follow me and go to room whatever. They engage and they really talk to them a lot, and they had such a great experience there that they said, you know what, do you mind emailing me your resume, because I'd love to hire you for a role in whatever.
Wow.
And she didn't end up taking it because she had another one, but she said, you know what, I'll email you afterwards. And then she ended up landing a full-time role because she couldn't even take the summer internship, and then she ended up with a full-time role. So a lot of these little things that sometimes just putting yourself out there and asking you'll probably be told no a whole bunch of times, but then it only takes that one yes to give you that opportunity and have an amazing experience. So yeah, I thought those were some amazing pieces of guidance and creative ways to do so. And you can always take a look at those pretty standard, like go on the street and put a sandwich board and say, I'm looking for a job and hand out resumes. But I'm glad you didn't really talk about those types of things. But these are ones where you can still do that. But here they sound like a little bit more tried and true ones where when you do it, you'll actually land something. Whereas the other one is just more like hope and pray and then see if someone takes pity on you, that sort of thing. So I think that's amazing guidance. And I guess, are there any other last minute pieces of SWIKE or other creative solutions in terms of how to get a job that you'd want to share?
I mean, no, I think we've covered pretty much everything today. Yeah, but think that I feel like I've only listed 6 things. I feel like there must be tons of more, and I would love to hear people's stories about that. Like, in the comments, they should definitely share their unconventional ways of finding work, because I'm sure there's much more.
For sure. I'm sure there's a lot out there. And one quote comes to mind or speaks to me in terms of all the stuff that we talked about. It's I think it's a quote by Zig Ziglar, where he says, you can have anything you want if you help others get what they want, right? So now your trick is to, in any of the contexts here, like, what do other people want and how can you help them get it? And then you can get whatever you want, right? So in the example of like the booth at an exhibition or a trade show or whatever, volunteering and information gathering and all those sorts of stuff, it's giving other people what they want, and then eventually you get what you want. So thanks so much, Anita, for joining us for this episode, and hopefully we'll have you back for another one.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.